Hello and welcome to the How Conversation series. It is a distinct honor, privilege, pleasure, you name it, to welcome with us today Admiral William H, we'll call him Bill McRaven.
Well, thanks, Dana. First, let me say what an honor it is to join you with this How conversation. And it has been a while since you and I have kind of shared a conversation together, so I'm looking forward to this.
Admiral McRaven has a 37-year career in the United States Navy, retiring as the United States Special Operations Commander. There were a few things that he participated in his long career. Three noteworthy ones are the capture of Saddam Hussein, the rescue of Captain Phillips, and the end of the manhunt for Osama Bin Laden. He retired in 2014 and went on to be the chancellor of the University of Texas system, leading within a large educational system. Admiral McRaven, it is just a delight to get back, at least virtually on screen with you, to be able to literally see you and to welcome you to the How conversation. How are you doing, and how are you and your wonderful bride of many years doing with your family throughout these several crises that we're facing?
Yeah, my wife and I are doing great. We're here in Austin, Texas. As you mentioned, after I retired, I took over the role as the chancellor of the University of Texas system for about 3.5 years. Stepped down from that just a couple of years ago, and since then, I've been doing kind of what old retired guys do, and I am teaching, which I enjoy doing. I'm doing a little bit of writing, a little bit of speaking, so life is pretty good.
How was that transition for you from a 37-year career in the Navy and as an admiral to leading an educational and university system? I know transitions are usually wonderful times for us to kind of reflect on who we are, why we are, and also a chance to reinvent ourselves. What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, I think surprisingly enough, the transition was pretty seamless. Going from running the U.S. Special Operations Command to running the university system, there were a lot of parallels. When I was the commander of SOCOM, I had 12 subordinate commanders, 3 stars, 2 stars, and 1 stars. When I was the chancellor of the University of Texas, I had 14 different institutions that worked for me, and some of them were very large institutions like the University of Texas at Austin and MD Anderson Cancer Center, and then some of them were smaller institutions. So I had this relationship with subordinate commanders. When I was in the military, I had to go testify on Capitol Hill. Well, here I had to go to the state legislature and testify with them. I had my troops when I was in the military. I had my students and faculty as the chancellor. So frankly, the parallels were very similar. And I was very, very blessed and fortunate to have just a remarkable staff that worked for me at UT. Some of the most professional MDs and PhDs and lawyers and great professionals in both healthcare and higher education. And of course, as you know, Dana, anytime a leader comes into a situation, you draw upon the experience of the great men and women that are working with you in order to ensure you're doing the job correctly. So the transition, other than trying to figure out, what I was going to wear every day, because I didn't have a standard uniform, it was actually remarkably easy, and I loved my time as the chancellor.
Fantastic. I was going to go back through your military career. That's been very well documented. I'd like to actually jump into something that you said recently. Well, actually, it's been a theme of many comments you've made about, being a tower of truth. And I think that that's something that's very important in terms of being a moral leader, of being a truth teller. That's something that you've said about, heroes and leaders are the tower of truth. I wonder if you might describe, what is that? What does that mean for those that are listening?
Well, I always look at truth as a component of integrity. And I think integrity there are a lot of aspects of integrity, but frankly, truth is the foundation. And you realize very quickly, if you are a person that tells the truth and people know that you are honest, then they are more willing to trust you. And everything about relationships is about trust. If people trust you in their personal lives, then they're going to be, great friends and great colleagues. If they trust you in your business life, then they're going to loan you money and they're going to work with you as a company. If they trust you in your national security life, if they trust America and they trust American leadership, then they are more likely to establish treaties, to work with you, to have alliances. So the nature of truth, to me, is about trust. If you are not truthful, then people begin to doubt your trustworthiness. And without trust, very difficult to get things done. Just a quick side note, I always think about the lessons I've learned in my life, and a lot of them were on the battlefield. But one of the more important lessons I learned kind of early on in my military career was actually in the Pentagon. I was working for a Navy captain named Ted Grabowski, and I think it was on my first day on the job. I was a senior Navy lieutenant, probably all of about, 26, 27 years old. And I went to my first meeting, and it was a budget meeting. And I remember in the course of the budget meeting, at some point in time, the three-star admiral was kind of focusing on my boss about the nature of the line items in the budget. Again, a very kind of mundane sort of thing. And my boss at some point in time was very clear and very honest about how we had built the budget. And it surprised me because it was going to cost us millions of dollars because the admiral immediately kind of cut the budget. And I came up to him afterwards and I said, "I'm sorry, boss, I don't get it. I mean, it looks like we just took a beating." And he said, "No, on the contrary," he said, "we won this fight because we showed a level of integrity. And let me tell you something, he said, in the Pentagon, you need to know it is always about the truth. You must always tell the truth, never misrepresent the truth. Because if you do that, then people won't trust you. And if they don't trust you, you are of no value to me." So this idea that truth and trust and value to your relationships were really, reinforced in my time in the Pentagon of all places.
Admiral, that was wonderful. You used so many terms like truth together with the word trust, which is at an all-time low and precipitously going down according to many different polls. And you used the word integrity. You also talked about truth being dangerous. What did you mean by that?
Well, what we've seen, I think, throughout the course of history is sometimes when people tell the truth, people don't want to hear the truth. Speaking truth to power can always be dangerous. It can be dangerous, if you are an employee and you are speaking truth to your boss, it can sometimes get you fired. If you are in the national security arena and you are speaking truth about a particular strategy or a plan, it can get you ostracized and fired and potentially worse. So those people that show the integrity to stand up for what is truthful, I think that is sometimes a gamble and sometimes can be very risky. Now, you would hope that the good leaders respect those men and women that tell the truth. I can tell you, I always wanted the people that worked for me to make sure that they told me when I was about to walk into a minefield, if they thought I was doing something wrong, if they thought that my plan was bad, they better tell me. And if they failed to tell me, if they failed to kind of tell me the truth, certainly as they saw it, then frankly, I would hold them accountable for not being honest with me. But again, I think the truth sometimes can be dangerous depending upon the circumstances you're in.
There's consequences, and it is a decision on the consequences.
Right.
Outstanding. You also talk about it taking moral courage to be truthful. And I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about what moral courage is and how that plays into truth telling and being the tower of truth, but also maybe how that differs from just courage in general.
Yeah, when I think of courage in general, again, just based on my experience, I think of courage, almost in a physical sense. It's the courage to charge the hill. It is the courage, to do something that puts your life at risk. Having said that, when I balance that with moral courage, I think moral courage has an equal place in the pantheon of heroes. The fact of the matter is, moral courage is standing up for what you know to be right, doing the right thing when there are consequences that could be detrimental to you.
Wow, I'm so glad you said doing the right thing. I think so much of our time and energy is doing the next thing right, as opposed to sometimes doing the next right thing. I think that's to quote Dov Seidman from the Howe Institute.
Well, as you all know, in the military, almost on a daily or weekly basis, you are confronted with moral dilemmas. Some of them are small, and even the small ones, you build this habit of integrity by making, even the small moral decisions the way you think it should be made. And those, when you begin to do that, you build this habit of, hey, I'm sorry, we're not going to compromise on this. We're going to do what is morally right, even though it may seem, a small issue at the time. I tell a lot of my young students about general order number one. In the military, we have general order number one, and there is the direct reading of general order number one is something to the effect of, I will take care of my post and everything within view. And the belief, of course, is that general order number one is about being a sentry at a post, and you're responsible for manning that gate or manning that post and making sure that anything within your view you take care of. But I think there's a much greater philosophical point, which is general order number one is your responsibility as a leader. You are responsible for your post and everything within view. So if you see something bad going on and it's not right immediately at your post, you just can't say, oh, sorry, it's not my problem. It's over there. Now, that's not what leaders do. Leaders follow general order number one. You see a problem, you address it. And I think back to the issue of kind of moral courage, there are times when you see problems and you know them to be problems. And the best thing you can do is air those problems out as quickly as possible. Make sure the chain of command understands you have made a mistake. You better have a plan to fix that mistake so that, again, they can maintain their trust in you. Everybody's going to make mistakes. Everybody's going to have problems. If you continue to kind of hide those problems, it will not serve you well.
How do you build a culture of doing, like moral courage culture of doing the right thing in a large organization like you had with the U.S. Special Operations Command or the University of Texas system? That's a big organization with many layers.
It all starts at the top. If you are a leader that has a strong moral compass, if you are honest and you have integrity, and people know you to not only walk the walk, but talk the talk, then the men and women that work for you will see that behavior. And they will know that that is the behavior that is expected of them. And then what happens in any organization, as it starts at the top, it will move like wildfire across the entire culture. Because the young men and women at the very bottom of the chain of command will see what the leader is doing. And they will realize that that is the expectation of the leader.
Yeah, I'd like to get right to that piece of it, because your point is wonderful about kind of moral muscle, and how do you build that moral muscle? I mean, you've been through such incredible physical, arduous training that has built lots of muscle, but also your moral muscle.
Well, first let me say, I don't want to be painted as being too righteous or too moral. Rest assured, I have made my mistakes. Not every decision I've made has been as moral as I would like it to be. Not every decision I have made has been right or righteous. And I think this is something we have to all understand. Like, there is no kind of perfect moral leader in the world today, but you still have to work to be as moral as you can. I always told folks in every organization I was in, I used a litmus test on every decision and every action I took. Is it moral, legal, and ethical? Is it ethical? Are you following the rules? Is it legal? Are you following the law? And is it moral? Are you following what you know to be right? Having said that, did I always make that decision that way? No, because I'm human. And when you don't make the decision that way, it ought to make you sick to your stomach. And I can tell you, the times that I have faltered, it has. And I hope it continues to do that. And back to our earlier discussion, you really have to exercise this every opportunity you can. It can't be about, well, when the really tough moral decision comes, doggone it, I'm going to make the right decision. Because you may not if you don't work that muscle, as you said, every day. If the little things, you let those slide, then the chances are when the time comes to make that big decision, you may not make the right decision because you haven't built up the habit and the moral muscle necessary to make that decision.
I wonder if you might share with us one of your failures that resonates or ruminates, and maybe a public apology that you had to make. I mean, we've seen recently some people step forward to apologize, to say, gosh, I was wrong. And what was that for you?
Yeah, there have been so many of them, but I guess one that comes to mind. We had just a horrible incident when I was over in Afghanistan, and the force that was under my command went on a target. in an attempt to get a bad guy. We had intelligence on him, but by the time the force got there, the individual we were tracking had moved off the target unbeknownst to us. So the guys surrounded the target the way we normally do it. It's a big compound. The guys put in blocking positions. The snipers get up on the roof. And once they get up there, they actually call out. And they get on a bullhorn. They say, come out with your hands up, sort of thing. Well, again, it was nighttime. Somebody came out with an AK-47. The sniper engaged that individual. Another person picked up an AK-47, and they were in a doorway, and that person was engaged. And then all of a sudden, the fight kind of died down. Well, in the course of now kind of clearing the building and going through, we found that not only had the force killed the two men, but inadvertently, as the rounds had hit the second man, they'd gone through and killed a couple of women on the target. When I realized the egregious nature of this, and the two men turned out to be actually Afghan policemen, I mean, it was the worst case of, the biggest tragedy I can tell you in my time in Afghanistan in the military. And my heart just broke for the family. So I realized I had to go, I needed to go make an apology to this Afghan father and the family for this incredible tragedy. And I remember asking, I had an Afghan advisor, a colonel that was with me, actually he was general by that time, that was with me. And I remember going to him and General Salim, and I said, Salim, what do I need to do? And he looked at me kind of funny. He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, I mean, I don't even know the right words to say. I mean, how can this man ever forgive me? And Salim said, oh, he will forgive you. I said, I don't understand. I mean, I killed his two sons and probably one of his daughters. How will he ever forgive me? He says, because, Allah understands. God understands these things happen. And he says, and oh, by the way, by forgiving you, it takes the burden off of him. And I remember thinking, well, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not sure I believe it. Well, when I got down to the small village, and it was, it was like me and one other American and a couple hundred Afghans, and they were, needless to say, they were not in a particularly good mood. And I went to apologize to the father, and you could just see the pain in this father's eyes. And I mean, my heart really broke for him. And he was incredibly gracious. And I apologized for the nature of the tragedy and for a few other things. And he forgave me. And then more importantly, his son, who had been there, and his son clearly had hatred in his eyes. And in the course of the father and my discussion, the son said something to the effect of, we will no longer have any hate in our heart. And I thought, wow, that is just a remarkable moment of forgiveness on their part. And I don't know that I could have been that strong, or I don't know that I could have been that good as to have, forgiven somebody who was responsible for these tragic occurrences. So, but I learned a lot from that. I learned, the value of forgiveness. I learned the value of, recognizing that at the end of the day, when you do something wrong, even if it is inadvertent, which this clearly was inadvertent. I mean, it was just one of these horrible wartime tragedies that nobody wanted. But nonetheless, whether it was, conscious, whether it was advertent or inadvertent, which it was inadvertent, you're still responsible. I was still responsible. You still have to go, own up to that mistake.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. I know you have many more to share that lead to the quote that you said, that only when you are humble, only when you realize the limits of your understanding, the shortcomings of your knowledge, the boundaries of your intellect, only then can you find the answers you are seeking. I'd like to read another quote. You said, if you do not approach the world with humility, it will find a way to humble you. The crucible of war teaches you that you are not invincible. So what is the connection now between this wonderful virtue of humility and moral leadership from your perspective?
Well, there's a couple things here. It is important to be confident. As a leader, as you well know, you have to be confident. The troops want a confident leader. The University of Texas system wants a confident leader. Businesses want a confident leader. And so you're always kind of walking this very narrow line between confidence and hubris. And I think you always have to be careful about being overly confident to the point where now, you think you are the smartest man and woman or woman in the room. And this gets back to humility. And again, I have been humbled more times than I care to remember, because sometimes I have not always walked that line between confidence and hubris correctly. And every time you do, again, the world finds a way, if you're not humble, it will humble you. But also in humility, I think it is great for a leader, because you realize that it isn't about you. You are not Napoleonic. There just aren't a whole lot of Napoleons in the world. So what you have to understand is the men and women that make things work are those folks at the grassroots level, the deck plate level, as we say in the Navy, the airmen, the privates, the young seamen, all the way up. They're the ones that make the mission successful. It's not you that makes the mission success. You can set the conditions for success, but a humble leader understands that your job is to make them successful. And if you think for a minute that, because you had some Napoleonic genius that everything went right, you forget that it was the young sergeant who was refueling the helicopter that did it right, that did it on time, that allowed the helicopters to move from point A to point B to get your SEALs there on time. So this is the nature of, of humility, is you better recognize that it's a team game, team sport, and you're just fortunate enough to be in charge.
I hear very loudly the thread of, the continuum of humility and hubris. And because we all have an ego, how delicate
Sure.
it is. And the theme I heard from you was when you stay other-oriented, that it's more easy to stay into the humility than to become part of the hubris.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you a question about a book that you've read that exemplifies kind of the power of moral leadership, because we've talked a lot about moral leadership at multiple levels, but I'm curious, what book comes to mind for you?
I think just about any book on Lincoln or Grant. I mean, I think of these two great leaders, both, men of, I think, great humility, and yet stood up during the toughest challenges in our nation and did the right thing. And they didn't always get it right, but they did the best they could to get the right thing. So I've got the library behind me. I've got half a dozen books on both Lincoln, and I've got Grant's memoirs. Just two remarkable men. But I would also offer on the fiction side, Once an Eagle. The great book about Sam Damon, who's takes him from World War I through World War II and on, and all of the struggles that he as a character has in terms of reconciling the ugliness of war, certainly as you go through World War I and World War II, ugliness of war with the nobility of, in this case, the men that he works with. But the one other one I'd offer from a military standpoint is All Quiet on the Western Front. And the reason I like this book is because it is written from a German soldier's point of view. And you see the German soldier grappling with all of the same problems that an American soldier would grapple with. If you took out the names and the locations, it's the same problems, which then as a soldier, you realize that your enemy, as this was in World War I, your enemy is not all that different than you. And you need to be cognizant of that as you are kind of building a war plan and you're thinking about the enemy and you're trying to dehumanize the enemy so that the soldiers can fight them without a whole lot of burden. These are challenging things you have to deal with. But I guess the final book I would offer, this is one that's been on my shelf for a long time, The Foundations of Moral Obligation. So this was it's a book on a course that was done at the Naval War College by Jim Stockdale, Admiral Stockdale. And it is essentially the lecture series, as you're probably familiar with. But I have found in the Foundations of Moral Obligation some great bits of wisdom from Admiral Stockdale.
So I guess I'd like to finish with the question of, what's one behavior or some important action that people should take to kind of be part of this creating the wave of moral leadership that's so needed?
Yeah, it gets back to the very first thing we talked about, which is the truth. And to be honest, to be men and women of integrity, recognizing again that integrity, that again, I would offer the foundational quality of integrity is truth, is speaking truth. And the reason that moral leadership is so important, and I've had interesting discussions about this lately, and there's a difference between followers and moral leadership. Jim Jones at Jonestown had a lot of followers. That did not make him a great leader. So we have to be careful about seeing leaders and being able to differentiate between, well, this is a person that has a lot of followers, or is this person a great leader? Again, great leaders do the right thing, because when you don't do the right thing, but when you don't build a culture of integrity, then you end up eventually with a house of cards that will collapse. So you think about, and again, Michigan State and Penn State and Lehman Brothers and Wells Fargo, and I mean, the list goes on and on of companies that appeared to be doing well, universities that appeared to be doing well, organizations that appeared to be doing well, but inside, because there were morally corrupt leaders at some level, then all of a sudden it collapsed, and the result was a disaster, and people beginning to question the integrity of the institution. So but if the leaders do the right thing, again, there are always going to be people in a large organization that are not going to do the right thing. And then as a leader, you have to say, again, my responsibility. At the end of the day, as a leader, I don't care whether they're 5 levels below you, it is your responsibility. And then you've got to say, we've got a problem. I'm going to put the problem out there for everybody to see. It's an ugly, ugly problem, but guess what? I've got a plan for resolving it. We're going to hold people accountable. We're going to get it resolved. This is the leadership we have to show, particularly in this time of pandemic and economic turmoil and racial tension and social injustice. If we don't show this kind of leadership at all levels, then I worry about the future.
You talked about, this is really a difficult time, and yet you have been so positive in terms of talking about why you retain hope. So I'd like to because you've really talked about many things that are troubling, even the military. You're very vocal to say we don't always get it right in the military, and these principles apply there as well as everywhere. But what gives you hope for the future?
Yeah, I think it surprises people, but I am the biggest fan of the millennials and the Gen Z. And this narrative somehow that, the millennials are these, soft, entitled little snowflakes that I'm quick to point out, well, you've never seen them in a firefight in Afghanistan, or from my time as the chancellor, watching these young men and women go to school in the Rio Grande Valley and the Permian Basin, first time, members of their family to go to college, and they are about to change the entire trajectory of their families because, they are doing the right things. But I also see them mobilize in a way that, candidly, I don't know that my generation did. The millennials here, they're going to question things. Well, we in leadership positions need to be prepared for the hard questions. I'm okay with that. If we can't answer the hard questions, then maybe we've got it wrong. So what gives me hope? What gives me hope are the next generation of young men and women that are coming up. They're not like my generation. I think in many ways they are so much better. And it will not be easy. We are going to go through a very rough patch here, but I have such faith and confidence in these young men and women that I know we're going to come out stronger in the end.
Hear, hear, echo that. Admiral McRaven, it is just wonderful to see you again, and I thank you so much for this really inspiring opportunity that you've given us today.
Well, thank you very much, Dana. It's been great to join you.
Thank you.